One signature. That's all it took to destroy a millionaire's empire, his marriage, his name, and it was legal. He didn't lose his fortune in the stock market or a bad investment. He lost it to a man who smiled while handing him the pen. They say the devil hides in the details. But for Marcus Valero, the devil arrived on letterhead paper, slipped beneath a gold paperweight shaped like a bull, a symbol he once thought invincible. The office smelled like imported leather and quiet power. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Manhattan's skyline, but Marcus wasn't watching the view. He stood behind his massive desk, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the contract lying open before him. A single page, dense paragraphs, innocuous language. The kind of thing he'd skimmed 1,000 times in his 20-year career. His general counsel had already vetted it. His CFO nodded at it like it was a joke. His assistant, Clarissa, handed him his favorite pen with a smile that suggested this was just another Tuesday. But somewhere in his gut, there was a twitch. He signed anyway. The moment passed, like a sneeze you thought was coming and didn't. He capped the pen and returned it to Clarissa, who swept the contract away without a second glance. By noon, Marcus was back in the boardroom, charming foreign investors and sipping 12-year scotch like the king he still believed himself to be. That was February. By June, he was living in a 2-bedroom apartment in Jersey City, eating microwaved burritos and avoiding calls from people who once begged for his time. It wasn't sudden, not really. It was a quiet unraveling like a sweater snagged on a nail, one thread, then another, then everything. It started with a headline in the Wall Street Journal. Valero Group tied to shell firms in Dubai tax shelter scheme. Marcus read it in bed, still half asleep. He blinked, reread it, assumed it was a misunderstanding. Clarissa didn't answer his texts. His general counsel was on vacation. The CFO was unreachable. Then came the subpoenas. Then came the banks. Then came his wife. Lee left on a Wednesday. No fights, no screaming, just a long silence over breakfast, then a single sentence: "I can't do this again." Again. That word haunted him. It was true, Marcus had nearly lost everything before, back in 2009. Back then, it was the market collapse, not betrayal. And back then, Lee had stayed. She'd slept on an air mattress with him in a studio above a Thai restaurant and laughed when the ceiling leaked. But now they had country club memberships and matching Tesla plaids. Their son, Cameron, was enrolled at Exeter. Their daughter, Sophia, had a horse named Chardonnay. And Lee, she wasn't the woman who'd once eaten week-old Chinese takeout by candlelight with him. She was a version of herself that needed certainty, not grit. The hardest part, Marcus didn't blame her. Because deep down, he had become a version of himself he didn't recognize either. The lawyers called it strategic misrepresentation. The media called it fraud. Marcus knew what it really was, a trap. That contract, the one he signed without reading, the one that handed over control of 3 shell companies he'd never heard of to a man named Preston Vale, had been laced with fine print that rerouted millions in company assets to offshore accounts under Valero's name. Preston, it turned out, wasn't just a business partner. He was a con artist wrapped in a Brooks Brothers suit and a $300 haircut. And Marcus, he was the perfect Mark, arrogant, distracted, and drowning in the illusion of control. When the SEC froze his assets, he watched a judge, a woman barely out of her 30s, read out the list of seized properties. His penthouse, his Hamptons estate, the Aspen Chalet, the 3-bedroom place in Coral Gables that he forgot he even owned. All gone. All because of one signature. One paperweight. One moment of believing he was untouchable. And now, he sat in silence, in a room where the only decoration was a cracked lamp and a wall calendar from 2022, trying to remember the last time he'd said something honest to anyone, including himself. The first morning in Jersey City, Marcus stood by the kitchen sink, staring into a cracked porcelain bowl of instant oatmeal. No blueberries, no chia seeds, just beige sludge and silence. The hum of the fridge was louder than he remembered appliances being, or maybe it was just that there was nothing left to drown it out. He had tried half-heartedly to reach Clarissa. No answer. Her number now belonged to someone named Devon, who sounded deeply confused and a little high. The Valero Group had cut him loose, not quietly either. The board issued a statement that made it clear Marcus Valero no longer represents the values of this institution. A perfect press release, sanitized betrayal. And still, Marcus kept checking his email. Some part of him still believed someone, anyone, might say it had all been a mistake. They didn't. Cameron called once, just once, from a blocked number. He was 17 and sounded older than Marcus remembered. There was hesitation in his voice, like he wasn't sure whether he was supposed to be angry or worried. "Mom says you knew about the whole Dubai thing." Marcus closed his eyes. "I didn't," he whispered. Silence. "I didn't read it." More silence. Then the click of the call ending, no goodbye. 3 weeks passed, then 4. The mailbox began to fill with envelopes marked urgent in red. One day, he opened the door to find a man standing there with a stack of legal documents and a half-pitying smile. "Mr. Valero, you've been served." It was a civil suit, 3 actually. Investors, partners, even his own cousin Vinny, who'd sunk $500,000 into Valero Carbon Ventures, a startup Marcus barely remembered greenlighting. And behind it all was the same name, again and again, Preston Vale. Marcus tried Googling him. Nothing but LinkedIn profiles that led nowhere, photos scrubbed, background vanished, like he'd never existed. The man was a ghost. Desperate, Marcus reached out to the one person he'd sworn never to call, Anthony Bianchi, a former rival, now a billionaire real estate developer. The two had once nearly come to blows over a failed casino project in Atlantic City. Bianchi answered on the second ring. "Marcus, Jesus Christ, I thought you were dead." "I might be." He explained everything. The contract, Preston, the shell firms, the signatures. There was a long pause, then a sigh. "You don't need a lawyer. You need a bloodhound, someone who can find this Preston guy." "I don't have money." "I didn't ask for money." That stunned him. Bianchi had once sued his own brother over a loan dispute. "Why help me?" Marcus asked. Another pause. "Because I've seen that contract. A guy in LA got wiped the same way last year. It's a play, and you're not the first idiot who signed without reading." Marcus felt something shift, not hope, not yet, but something like direction. A week later, a woman knocked on his door. She wore black jeans, a leather jacket, and a face like she'd smiled once, a long time ago. Her name was Eve Capel, ex-IRS investigator turned freelance corporate bloodhound. Bianchi had sent her. "You're Valero," she said, eyeing him up and down like a contractor surveying a collapsed building. "You used to own half of Midtown." "Used to." "You ready to find the guy who burned you?" Marcus hesitated. His hands were still trembling from the coffee he'd spilled that morning. His fridge was empty. His lawyer had dropped him, and his daughter had sent back the birthday card he'd mailed, unopened. "I don't know what I'm ready for," he said finally. Eve nodded as if she'd heard it before. "Good, that means you're almost honest." Then she pulled a file from her bag and dropped it on his chipped kitchen table. "Let's find your ghost." The file smelled like cigarettes and rain. Thick, well-worn, with dog-eared pages and ink smudges, it didn't look like anything digital. That alone gave Marcus some strange sense of confidence, maybe because it felt real, tangible, not the slippery illusion of safety he'd once traded in. Eve flipped through the contents with the precision of someone used to secrets. "Your guy, Preston Vale, doesn't exist." Marcus leaned in. "What do you mean, doesn't exist?" "I mean the name's real, but the man is, not in the way you think." She tapped the edge of a photo, a passport scan, blurry and tilted. "This is one of 6 different Preston Vales registered with the state of Nevada, same date of birth, slightly different addresses, but all connected to the same offshore clearinghouse in the Caymans." She flipped again. "This one," she pointed to a grainy surveillance still of a man in a hotel lobby, sharp suit, expensive watch, face half turned to the camera. "This is the Preston who met you, yes." Marcus squinted. It was him, the smile, that smooth, sleazy confidence. The man who told Marcus over aged scotch that legacy isn't built in courtrooms, it's built in shadows. "Yes," he said, "that's him." Eve leaned back. "Name, not Preston, not really. Real name's Sean Avery, former hedge fund manager, blacklisted in 2016. Changed his identity 3 times. He runs a syndicate, mostly scams dressed up like investment firms. He targets men like you." "Men like me," Marcus repeated bitterly. She didn't soften. "Men who think they're too smart to get conned. Men with too much pride and too few questions." The words stung because they were true. Marcus swallowed hard. So what now, cops, FBI? Eve gave a short laugh. Please, you think law enforcement has time for this? This is corporate warfare. He'll be gone by the time you file your first complaint. Then what the hell am I paying you for? You're not paying me, Bianchi is. That silenced him. Eve stood and rolled up the file. You want this guy, you do what I say when I say it. No more suits. No more pretending you're still a CEO, you're broke. Act like it. Marcus clenched his jaw. Where do we start? She handed him a burner phone. First, we find the middleman, guy who forged the contract. He goes by Tors, runs a print shop in East Harlem, but it's just a front. For what? Fake identities, document laundering, shell firms. If Preston's sorry Sean is the kingpin, Tors is his pen. East Harlem was a different world. The streets buzzed with life that didn't care about fallen millionaires. No one looked twice at Marcus in his second-hand jacket and beat-up sneakers. He followed Eve through a maze of alleys until they reached a nondescript storefront, Ramos Printing and Design. Inside, it smelled like toner and cheap coffee. A man with a shaved head and gold tooth glanced up from a desk cluttered with paper samples. You're early, he said, not looking at them. We're not clients, Eve replied. That got his attention. Tor's hand moved under the desk. Eve didn't flinch. Relax. If we wanted to arrest you, you'd already be in cuffs. We just want to talk about Sean Avery. The name landed like a gunshot. Tor's expression changed. Not fear, something closer to disdain. That man ruined my cousin, he said. Promised him a cut of some Dubai deal, then left him to rot when the feds came. So help us find him, Marcus said, stepping forward. Tor stared at him, then laughed. You're the Velaro. Marcus stiffened. Damn, didn't think he'd actually go after someone famous. I'm not famous anymore. Tors considered him, then nodded. I'll give you something, but you didn't get it from me. He ducked behind the desk and returned with a thin folder. Last known address Sean Euste, Bahamas, but not the tourist parts. You'll need someone local, someone who knows how to find ghosts. Back in the apartment, Marcus paced while Eve read the file. His heart was pounding. If I go after him, what happens when I find him? Eve didn't look up. That depends. On what? On whether you want revenge or redemption. Marcus stopped packing. The question cut deeper than any lawsuit had. They landed in Nassau under a sweltering sun and an air of unwelcome familiarity. Marcus had vacationed in the Bahamas years ago, cocktails and coconuts, yacht clubs, the scent of sunscreen and arrogance. But this was different. This time there was no valet waiting, no glass of complimentary champagne, no room with an ocean view. This time he was hunting a man he used to toast to. The address Tors provided was on the outer edge of New Providence, past the tourist sheen and souvenir shops, where the streets turned narrow and unpaved. The rental car had no air conditioning. Eve didn't speak for most of the drive. She had a way of going still before a move, like a lioness watching a herd. The house was painted turquoise and leaned slightly left. Wind beat against its tin roof like it was owed something. Eve pulled the car over a block away. We don't go in loud, she said. Marcus nodded. What if he's not there? Then we wait. People like Sean don't disappear. They just hide better. They watched from the shadows of a closed fruit stand. Hours passed. Kids played soccer in the dust. An old man sold mangoes from a wheelbarrow. A rusty pickup arrived at the house. A man stepped out. Marcus's breath caught. It was him. The same smooth gait. That impossibly calm posture. Sean Avery or Preston, or whoever he was pretending to be this week, wore cargo shorts, a linen shirt and sunglasses that probably cost more than the car Marcus arrived in. Eve stood. Let's go. No, Marcus grabbed her arm. I want to go in alone. Eve blinked. You sure? He's not a guy who panics, but he might bolt. I need to look him in the eye. I need to say it. Say what? I don't know yet. The porch creaked under Marcus's weight. The door was ajar. Sean was inside, pouring rum over ice, humming something low and off-key. He didn't look surprised when Marcus stepped in. Well, Sean said without turning, took you longer than I expected. Marcus clenched his fists. You knew I'd come. Of course, you're predictable. Rich men always think they can fix what pride broke. I trusted you. Sean turned, smiling faintly. That was your first mistake. There was no remorse in his eyes, just cool, clinical detachment. You used me, Marcus said. You ruined lives, my family. Sean raised a hand. Don't get emotional, you signed, you were warned. Hell, your counsel flagged the clauses. You chose to be blind. Marcus stepped forward. Why me? Sean shrugged. You were ripe, over-leveraged, under question. You were a story waiting to collapse. That hit like a slap. Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out a flash drive. This has everything. Your shell firms, the Cayman roots, the fake names. If I hand this to Interpol. Sean laughed, a real gut-deep laugh. You think they don't already know? Come on, Marcus. I'm not the only one playing this game. You were just late to realize you weren't the dealer. Marcus stood frozen. Then what was the point? He asked. Why destroy me? Sean set down his glass and walked over, stopping inches away. You weren't destroyed. You were exposed. You built your empire on speed, flash, and shortcuts. I just gave it a little push. He tapped Marcus's chest. The fall was always yours. For a long moment they stared at each other. No more lies, no more illusions. Then Marcus stepped back. This isn't over. Sean smiled. It never is. Outside, Marcus exhaled. Eve was waiting by the car. You didn't kill him, she said flatly. I thought about it. She studied him, and I think he's right. I built something hollow. He just kicked it. Eve handed him a folder. Then start over. You've got enough here to burn him publicly, even if it won't put him in jail. Marcus took it. What if I don't want revenge anymore? Then make it count, she said. Tell the story, warn the next guy, break the chain. He looked back at the house, the turquoise shell of a lie. Then he turned away. That night in a cheap hotel near the airport, Marcus began writing. Not to the press. Not to the authorities. To his son. He titled the document, How I Lost Everything and What It Taught Me. The first sentence took 20 minutes. I am not the man you thought I was. Marcus stared at it, then deleted the period and typed it again, slower this time, like he needed to feel each letter. He wasn't writing a statement. He wasn't writing to save face. He was writing to Cameron, the boy who used to fall asleep on his chest watching Shark Tank and who now wouldn't pick up the phone. He wrote for hours, pausing only when his hands cramped or the tears started to gather and had to be blinked away. There was no self-pity, no excuses. Just honesty, raw, awkward, unpolished honesty. He told Cameron how ambition turned into obsession, how ego made him deaf to warnings, how pride had kept him from admitting he'd been duped. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He just asked for a second chance to be known. When he finished, the sun was rising. The sky outside the hotel window was streaked with orange and lavender. A new day, a thinner version of hope. Back in New York, Marcus found himself on the subway for the first time in 15 years. The city hadn't changed much, not really. People still avoided eye contact. The metal bars still smelled like sanitizer and sweat. And the silence between stops was still filled with the hum of a city pretending not to listen. He was on his way to Bianchi's office, not a favor call this time. He had an idea. They met in a sleek, windowless boardroom. Bianchi wore the same smug expression he always had, but his eyes softened when Marcus walked in. You look like hell. I've seen it. Marcus handed him a binder. What's this? Bianchi asked. A new firm, not finance, education, awareness. I want to create something that teaches people how these scams work, how to see the red flags, how to protect what they've built. Bianchi raised a brow. That sounds noble. It's not, Marcus replied. It's survival. I need to make something out of this wreck. Bianchi thumbed through the binder. You want funding? No, I want credibility. You've got it, I don't. That hung in the air for a beat. Then Bianchi slid the binder back. You've got more credibility now than you ever had when you were rich, because you bled. The project took off quietly. They named it Paper Cuts, a nod to the contracts, the small details, the bleeding that begins with one tiny slice. Marcus recorded the first video himself, shot in a studio donated by an old college friend who still believed in second chances. The backdrop was simple, just a black chair and a dim light. He stared into the camera. My name is Marcus Valero. I used to think I was the smartest guy in every room. Then I signed one piece of paper and it cost me everything. The video went viral in 2 days. Not because he was famous, but because he was honest. Messages poured in from all over the world, from retired teachers, small business owners, startup founders. People who had nearly fallen for similar traps. People who had and were still too ashamed to talk about it. And then 3 weeks later, an email came. Subject: I watched your video, see. No body, just that. Marcus stared at it for 10 minutes, afraid to breathe. He typed back, if you ever want to talk, I'm here. No business, just dad. No reply came that night. But the next morning, another email. Maybe we can grab coffee. I have questions. Marcus arrived early. The coffee shop was in Brooklyn, near a skate park Cameron used to love. He chose a booth near the back and ordered black coffee. At 11:07 a.m., Cameron walked in. He looked taller, thinner, older. He didn't smile, but he sat. And that was enough. Marcus leaned in. Thank you for coming. Cameron nodded slowly. Then in a quiet voice he asked, did you know it was going to fall apart when you signed it? Marcus shook his head. I didn't even read it. I thought I didn't need to. I thought I was invincible. Cameron looked away. That's what Mom said, that you thought you were better than rules. I did, Marcus admitted, and I was wrong. Silence hung between them. Then Cameron looked back, his voice firmer. So what now? And Marcus, for the first time in years, felt the answer rise without fear. Now I show up for real. Showing up wasn't glamorous. It didn't come with applause or articles or late-night interviews. It came in small, humbling tasks, answering emails from strangers recounting their own financial nightmares, reading court transcripts from other victims of Sean Avery's syndicate, appearing at middle schools to talk about trust, ambition, and the cost of arrogance. Kids didn't care about his name. They cared about the fact that someone like him could lose it all from one signature. Marcus showed up anyway. He moved into a one-bedroom in Queens. No doorman, no concierge, but the building had a soul, retired teachers, nurses, people who smiled when they saw him because they didn't recognize his face from Bloomberg. They just saw a man trying. It was November when he heard from Lee again. The text arrived late at night. I saw the video, Cameron showed me, you look different. He stared at the message for a long time before replying. I am not better, just less fake. No reply that night. But 3 days later she called. Her voice was still sharp, still measured, but the ice had melted just enough for conversation. I read your letters, she said, all of them. I didn't expect you to. I know, that's why I did. They met at a park bench overlooking the Hudson, a place they used to walk before kids and quarterly reports. Lee studied him. You look thinner. Stress diet. She almost smiled, almost. I'm not here to start something again, Marcus said carefully. I know. I just wanted you to know I'm not hiding anymore, from the truth, from the mess. Lee looked out at the water. I used to admire you because you never hesitated. Now, I think I admire you more for admitting when you should have. That was all. No declarations, no dramatic reunions, just two people sitting with the ashes of what once was, finally breathing. Paper cuts grew faster than expected. By spring, they'd partnered with 2 nonprofits and launched a small grant fund for scam victims in recovery. Eve, who Marcus had hired full-time, ran logistics with ruthless precision. She refused press interviews but appeared on podcasts under the pseudonym EK, her voice clipped and sharp as ever. She was the first to notice the name Avery resurface in financial chatter. Dubai again, she said one morning, sliding a dossier across his desk. Same playbook, different alias, guy's a virus. Marcus skimmed the document, and no one stopping him. Interpol flagged it, but he's already 2 moves ahead. The thing about men like Sean, they don't stop until someone makes them. Marcus nodded slowly. Then let's make noise. The second video was bolder. This time, he didn't just talk about his fall. He named Sean Avery directly. We've seen this man destroy lives, marriages, and retirements. He uses false identities, fake companies, and legal trickery to stay ahead. He counts on your silence. He leaned forward, eyes hard. Well, I'm not silent anymore. The internet exploded. News outlets picked it up. Survivors came forward. Anonymous tips poured in. A former assistant of Sean's leaked voice memos. The dots connected banks, shell firms, laundering fronts, and for once the world listened. Interpol issued a formal international warrant. It wouldn't be enough to cage him, but it would make hiding harder, it would make lying harder, and sometimes that was the beginning of justice. Late one evening, after a workshop at a small community college in the Bronx, Marcus sat on a bench outside, watching students drift into the night. A man approached, maybe early 40s, tired eyes, suit too cheap for the ambition in his shoulders. "You're Valero, right?" Marcus nodded. The man sat beside him. "I watched your talk," he said. "I almost signed something like that last year, some crypto startup, too good to be true. I was desperate." Marcus turned to him. "What stopped you?" The man shrugged. "Your story made me ask more questions, saved me, I think." He stood awkwardly, "Just wanted you to know." Then he walked away. And Marcus sat alone, not with pride but with something deeper. Purpose. 1 year to the day after Marcus signed the document that ended his empire, he stood in a high school auditorium in Newark, facing a crowd of teenagers who had never heard of the Valero Group and didn't care about the fall of a man in tailored suits. And that was exactly why he was there. "I lost $100 million with one signature," he said into the mic, letting the sentence land like a dropped hammer. A few murmurs, one laugh, but mostly stillness. He took a breath. "But what really cost me everything was believing that power makes you immune to consequences." He didn't read from notes. He didn't flash charts or graphs. He told the truth about greed, about blindness, about the long, slow climb back up from a fall that wasn't just financial but human. Afterward, a girl in the front row raised her hand. "You rich again?" Marcus smiled. "No, and I'm okay with that." "Why?" "Because now when I look in the mirror, I don't flinch." He walked home that night instead of taking a car. Spring had reached New York, finally, cherry blossoms blooming, air soft with rain and warm asphalt. His phone buzzed. A message from Cameron. "Can I come by this weekend? I think I want to volunteer with paper cuts this summer." Marcus stopped walking, just stood there on a quiet Brooklyn block with flickering streetlights, letting the words sink in. He replied, "Yes, I'd like that very much." Sean Avery was spotted in Montenegro later that month, using the name Greg Pierce. He dyed his hair and grown a beard, but it didn't matter. The international warrant had teeth now. Thanks to the media attention Marcus generated, Sean's options were shrinking, fast. Marcus didn't celebrate. Instead, he wrote a final piece on Paper Cut's blog. "Justice isn't always a verdict. Sometimes it's a warning heard in time." The post was shared over 300,000 times. On the anniversary of the company's collapse, Marcus visited the gravesite of his father. He hadn't been in years. He brought a single folded page, the original copy of his speech from the first Paper Cuts workshop. He set it down gently against the headstone, weighed with a stone. "Not the legacy you wanted for me," he murmured, "but maybe it's the one I needed." And then life went on. Paper Cuts expanded to 6 states. Eve became co-director. Lee, though she never returned romantically, invited Marcus to family dinners now and then, quiet evenings where Sophia would ask about how hedge funds really worked, and Marcus would smile through a mouthful of too-dry roast chicken. He found laughter again, not the kind that echoed off marble floors or champagne glasses, but the small, honest kind like when Cameron slipped and called him Dad instead of Marcus and didn't take it back. He never bought back his penthouse, never drove another Tesla. Instead, he bought a used bike and a dog from a shelter named Felix, who snored louder than any human should. And on certain evenings, when the sky turned amber and the world held its breath, Marcus Valero would sit at his window, watching the city that once devoured him breathe quietly beneath him. He had nothing left to lose. Which meant, finally, he had everything he needed.